Welcome, everybody, once again to Faithful on the Clock, the Christian podcast where the volume is turned all the way up to get your faith and work aligned. As professionals in the business space, we focus a ton on being intentional. We're supposed to craft the life we want. For most of us, that starts with setting up the work we do. Everything else kind of orients around that. But today, my special guest, Peter Kolat, is going to teach us why we need to flip that script. Start with the bigger version of our own authenticity, and then fit work inside that. Let's hit it. Hello, listeners. Today on Faithful on the Clock, I'm chatting with special guest Peter Kolat. Peter is a transformational life coach, business mentor, investor, and the founder of Masters Unite. He is also the author of Authentic Self Rebirth. Peter's going to help us out today to look at the idea of the authentic self in the context of how we approach planning, work, and our faith. So, Peter, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Wanda. I love your podcast name, and I'm so grateful to be able to come on here and pour into your audience.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to have you. So just to get us started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about our background so our listeners know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I was born in Poland. I came to the United States when I was 14, and in 1991, I just aged myself. Really, man, I'm old.
That's okay.
91, didn't speak any English, just suitcase in my hand, and learned English, and went into college. And like everybody else, like they tell you to do, and became an architect. And I was doing architecture in Michigan for several years, up until about 2007, 2008. And we all know what happened during those years. That was fun years, especially when you're in a real estate industry. So during that particular time, I saw the writing on the wall, and I started my own company on the side. And the company was to help real estate investors and agents market themselves on the internet. And I developed, through a School of Hard Knocks, the entire course and curriculum and everything. And I was helping a lot of people doing that. And that business grew up until about the end of 2010. My wife at that time came to me and she said she wants a divorce because, frankly, I wasn't really there because I was all about business, because I thought that business is going to get me to, guess what, freedom, spending time with my family, my wife, and everything. And in fact, it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
So after that, I let go of the entire business because I went into this, what I call optimistic depression. Spent that time while there for a little bit. And since then, that's when the book was originally born, because I wish I had that kind of a manual back then to help me get out of that, I call it stinking thinking, and was able to go and, get myself out of it, start another company, and we end up being a coach. And right now, what I currently do is I love human psychology, human brain, and helping people really dig into to see what is driving them, what is the reason why I'm the way I am, and looking to help them, empower them to be able to live their life. Because think about it this way, whether we work for someone else or we start our own company, it is in order to what? To have some freedom, right? To be able to spend time with our families, to be able to have, go on trips or whatever it might be for you.
Right.
And ironically, it doesn't work that way for some strange reason. So I help people to find themselves, get back to the authenticity of it, and then be able to go and actually live the life that they want.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that. It sounds like, your background kind of, you weren't necessarily looking to coach per se, like you said, you were in architecture, but you kind of got thrown into it based on the experience that you've had. But we know that, as you had mentioned, your book is about authenticity. So how is your approach to coaching different? Like, why do you take the approach that you do? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I wasn't supposed to be, I was never thought I was going to be a coach and helping people and business owners. However, when I was in that mastermind back then, everybody kept telling me, listen, you should be a coach. You have this knack for pouring into and poking digging up what's really behind it. And what I have found is that there is a fallacy, that my belief system is that there's a fallacy in the society that the personal development space especially talks about, you need to change, you need to fix yourself. There's something wrong about the way you are, so you need to change, you need to fix yourself, right? And I personally don't believe that. I think it is, the way God created us to be. And in fact, if you go to Genesis, right at the beginning, it talks about now created in our image, right? So I looked from the perspective like, you know what, when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, or you maybe know a 3, 4, 5 year old, how are they? What kind of a person they are? Are they being fearful? No. Are they being stopped by different things? No. They just go and experience life like very curiosity driven, right? They're unstoppable. They don't take no for an answer. I mean, I don't know if you ever talked to a 5 year old and said you can not have ice cream, right?
Oh,
See
yes.
how that went, right? And they find 20 different ways why they should have ice cream, even if it's 11 o'clock at night, they should be in bed, right? So the ways of being that they are what we human beings are trying to get to here as an adults, if you really think about it. So what happened? Well, the society, the world, whether it was parents, teachers, school, whatever it might be, created this belief system because we were looking to how do we fit in as a human being, how do we survive in this world, and we became that version of ourselves that now we're trying to fix or change. Now, if we just look from the perspective of authenticity and get back to that, 3, 4, 5 year old self that's fearless, that's unstoppable, that's curious, that is loving, because guess what? Those 4 year olds are very loving, aren't they? You know? And we get back to that with that wisdom that we've kind of grown over life. Man, we can really make amazing things happen in our lives.
Sure. Well, I think, when I'm listening to you talk, we do have this idea that you kind of have to find out who you are and fix it. But what I'm hearing you say is that you already who you are. You just kind of have to accept that and kind of redirect yourself to be more of that. There's nothing wrong with you, which I think, quite frankly, a lot of people need to hear because that's pressure, right? To fix yourself.
Yeah.
And think about how many things that we do for that. Like we take the different job, we do things that other people want us to do. That's not really us. So I think the idea of really thinking about who did God make me to be before anything, I think that kind of really sets a very different tone than what we kind of hear in culture, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
So to connect that back to the work context, if we are going to say, okay, we're going to reconnect to this authenticity that we have through God. So most of the time, we look at work and we build everything around our work, like who
Yeah.
we are. We structure our life around that.
hmm
But when we were talking a little bit before in our first interview that we did before the show, you had talked about how you basically flip the script and
Yeah.
you have people construct the life that they want through your coaching and then say, okay, well, we've got to fit work into the life that you want. So tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about that and how that works.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I think it's a really powerful shift for people to recognize. So I learned this, full disclosure, I learned this from a company called Life on Air. And what ends up happening is, and I made some shifts in that, but what we think about how society talks about, you want to start a business? Great. What's your business plan? Let's create a business plan. And you start to get very clear on that business plan. And what ends up happening is this business plan starts to take over your life because you're clear on the path of what you want to get to. But nobody ever tells us that or asks us, what do you want your life to look like? Right? I'm like, up until my mid 30s, I never knew those people, the gurus that were talking about, what will you envision in the future, right? 5 years from now, what do you envision your life? But not really getting clear on what that life looks like. So what I did is let's flip the script and get very clear what you want your life to look like. What does it look like as far as your relationships? Let's say with your spouse or with your kids, or what's your relationship with yourself or with the Lord, right? What is that? What are your needs? What are your wants? Do you have any regrets? What does your health look like? All the different areas of your life, get very clear of what you want that to look like and write it on a piece of paper, actually write on a piece of paper in the present tense as it is true right now kind of a thing. Now, granted, that's not true right now,
Right.
but you write in the present tense, right? Because guess what? Your brain doesn't know the difference what's real and what's not. And we can
Right.
talk about it if you want. But write it out in the present tense. Now, once you are clear on that, then you start looking from the perspective, okay, if I were to live that life, what does my calendar look like? And we go through this exercise of actually putting these different pieces in the calendar, like let's say morning routine with the Lord. So I spend more every morning with the Lord. I go to the gym, me personally, at 3:30 in the afternoon. So I have that in my calendar. And when I developed this, I had to be very intentional on making sure that between the 10 a.m. and 2:30 p.m., that's when my kids were younger, I had to work like my hair is on fire in order to be picking them up from school and dropping them off at school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was these different things, bookends in my business that helped me live that life. So now that you have that vision for your life, you have to ask yourself this. If I want to live that life, and in my calendar, at the end of the day, when I put everything from that vision into my calendar, well, I have left over maybe 15, 20, 22 hours of time left for my business. How do I set up this business to, guess what? Support that life.
Right.
And that's the flip that most people don't see because they go set up the business in order to get the life. Well, let's flip the script and say, let's create a vision for our life. And then how do we set up the business to support that life?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes total sense. But I know there are
Yeah.
going to be people listening out there who say, well, okay, but Peter, if I want to do that, I have to have the business to get me the stuff in the life that I want. So how would you address that? Because I know that there are going to be people who can't see how to like logistically flip it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they get the concept, but they're just like, man, I don't know how to make that work.
Right. So one, obviously you have the plan, meaning
Mhm.
like, the vision. We wrote these visions. So then what I would encourage the listener to do is like, you got to start with one thing. Like when I started this whole entire journey, I didn't put everything in that vision into my life right then and there. It
Mhm.
was a stepping ladder, right? So one of the first things that I looked like, okay, so, for my life, I want to put, let's say, the morning time with the Lord, right? So when I start putting those different things in place, what ends up happening is I have to, in my business hours, for me, it was between 10 and 2:30, I have to be very intentional to make sure that I get those things done in order so I can go to the gym or spend time with my kids or spend time with the Lord, right? So those bookends made me very intentional to not waste time on Facebook, not go on social media, not learning before I start doing stuff. In my business, I had to do the things that I had to do, meaning like, let's say, reaching out to get clients, do marketing. What are the things, because I'm starting this business, I have to create revenue, right? So when I have to create revenue at the beginning of the business, I have to, what are some revenue generating activities in my business that I have to focus on? And most of the time, it's not about learning a strategy. It's about going and making the phone calls or doing the
Sure.
marketing or whatever it might be. And then you get very intentional to doing those things. And then you get a client, right? And you take the portion of that money that you made from the client, you reinvest it into the business. So then you either start hiring someone else to take over those low level activities to take care of that, like bookkeeping or whatever it might
Sure.
be. And then you start to kind of see how that pendulum kind of starts swinging in a different way.
Yeah. So again, I hear there's a little bit more of the logistics that can actually happen. But I know, you talk about basically, that you have to be intentional about those
Hmm.
things. But within that, I think there's boundary setting that needs to
Yep.
happen.
Hmm.
So if somebody is trying to set those boundaries, be intentional about it, but then they're getting pushback from other people, how do you address
Yeah.
that problem? Because I know there's going to be other people, maybe business partners, and they're like, what are you doing? Right? And they think you're crazy for doing what you're doing.
Right. So that's a great question because I deal with my students with this all the time, right?
Mhm.
So one, these other people, whoever it might be, spouses, husbands, business partners, or whoever it might be, or even possible clients. Let's say if you're a real estate agent, you get calls all the time, right? One, they don't know what your vision is. They have a view of what your vision is, and they have their own vision in a way, and they're trying to get you on their vision to basically work with that. Now, if you were to share what my vision is, then all of a sudden there might be a chance that they're going to be open to, okay, so that's what you're doing. That's why you're doing what you're doing. Like the reason why I'm not talking to you between 10 and 2:30 is because I know that in order for me to spend time with you and then dinner at 6 o'clock, wifey or husband, then I need to work like my hair is on fire during that particular time because that's my vision. So sharing that vision, I think, is important. The other aspect is that what I had to learn from myself that I was a big people pleaser. And the people pleaser in me would have a hard time saying no. Because if I said no, that means that people would not like me. They would get mad at me, right? And they're going to, walk away or get away, right? But if I just understand that there are the boundaries that I'm putting in place, there's one to help me grow. And by doing that, let's say if it's a business partnership, then guess what? That business partner is going to end up making more money because during those particular hours, I'm working on the revenue generating activities. So don't call me during those particular hours. And so I can focus on that. And then when I focus on that, I bring the new client. Guess what? The partner now all of a sudden is like, oh, so what you're doing is actually working. So let's keep doing that, right?
You get proof of concept. Yeah.
Right. So by focusing on your vision, being intentional, you actually help other people be intentional. Because guess what also happens? When you're focused during those hours on the business and you start being in your mind intentional with those things that you're doing that very moment, like being present, guess what happened? That transfers over to, let's say, when you're with your wife or your husband, now you're being intentional in that very moment with them. Mm-hmm. You're not thinking about business during that particular time. So now they like that because he's actually here. He's focusing with me, right? He's spending time with me. You're spending time with your kids. They're actually being intentional with them, even though you're just putting a puzzle together or whatever it might be, right?
Right.
So it transfers over. And then when it comes to having conversation like, well, I can't just not answer the phone call because somebody's calling me. So how you set up boundaries for that? Well, the way I've done it is that, let's say you get a VA that's going to answer the initial phone call. They have specific list of questions that are going to be qualifying questions to whether or not this, let's say in real estate industry, this possible buyer actually qualifies. And then if they qualify, the VA quickly reaches out to you and you call them back. But there's the initial conversation was answered right away, but you only talk to the people who are highly qualified people. Okay. And now it eliminates 80% of your phone calls that you had to jump on. And now you start to be much more productive in life.
Yeah, I really am glad that you brought up that idea of people pleasing within all this, though, because I know for me, that has been an enormous issue. And I think in my own experience, like we run into like this catch-22 because we think, well, if we please the people, then the business does well, right? And if the business does well, then I get the life that I want, right? So it kind of snowballs. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that if we actually hold those boundaries, it works to our benefit rather than holding us back. Even though we might feel like it's holding us back, it really doesn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And you know what? What I did at the beginning too, in order to help me say no, is what I did is whenever someone would, let's say, a business opportunity would come my way. And I'm the type of a person who's very visionary and I love growing things, love growing businesses. So when opportunity comes in, I'm like, ooh, that is sweet. I would love to do that. Let's jump on it, and I start looking from the perspective of how long is it going to take me to do this? And that possible business partner says, well, it'll take you 15, 20 hours a week in order for this thing to work. So now what I had to say is like, listen, let me think about this. So I went back and I looked at my vision and looked at my calendar and I started asking myself this question. If I have to put in an extra 10, 15 hours into this new business opportunity, what needs to go out of my vision, out of my calendar? And knowing myself, the first thing that would go out is what? Time for myself, or the gym time, or, sleep would go out, or, maybe time with the Lord in the morning because I can fit it in some other place and I'll start with me and then with the family, right? So it's a slippery slope. So I knew deep down that answer no was the right answer, but I couldn't say no. So what I did is I went back to that person and I said, listen, I would love to do this with you, which I'm not lying, right?
Right.
However, guess what? My vision doesn't allow me to do it. And then when I asked that question, when I, said that, he's like, what do you mean your vision? And I explained it to him. So now what did I do? I blamed me saying no on the vision. I wasn't the bad guy. The vision was the bad guy.
Right.
And guess who wrote that vision? Me. You know what I mean? That
Hmm.
kind of helped me not be such a big people pleaser.
Okay. So, but when you talk about vision, though, how can we understand that that vision that we've got, that it's not just our ego talking? Like we
Mhm.
really are getting, back to the core of the show. Like that is coming from our authentic self, who God wants to be, rather than just this idea of, professionalism. And we have kind of like this idea of what we could be.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's not an ego. That's a great question. So you got to ask that question, why do I want this?
Hmm.
Like, why? Like, dig a little bit deeper. Why do I want this? So if you say, well, I want a Lamborghini, it's a Lamborghini, not Lamborghini, right? I say Lamborghini. But if you want that, right? Why do I want that? Right? What's the real reason behind it? Well, because I want to make sure that people see that I'm successful, that, that I got it, right? So if that's the reason, hmm, maybe not a good idea, right? Because it's about that. That's you can tell that it's an ego thing. But if you say, well, Lamborghini is because growing up, my dad, when we were working on cars, and he always wanted the Lamborghini, and he wanted to go on and drive, and now my kids were talking about this, and what ends up happening is, I would love to have my dad go for a ride and take him, on those rides, and my kids, and spend time with them, and maybe even people in my neighborhood that, can't do it, give him the keys, and the people that I know, let them go on a date in that car, right? So now I'm basically maybe community, contributing to others. Now it gets more of like the heart thing as opposed to head thing. I think in a very easy kind of a distinction is looking from the perspective why you want this. Is it a heart thing or is it a head thing? Because
Hmm.
I think the head thing most of the times is going to screw you up. Whether the heart thing is more of like what you truly are meant to be, like what God had you to, on this earth for, kind of a thing. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, it does. But I mean, when you're talking about the heart, I do want to kind of maybe differentiate just a little bit, like because when we talk about heart, we think emotion, right?
Hmm.
But I think one of the biggest things that drives us into the vision that maybe we're not supposed to have is fear. Like we fear that we're not going to have a place to stay if we don't work hard. If we set those boundaries, then we'll lose things, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
relationships or financial security or whatever it is. And I think that can drive us to the vision that we're not supposed to be in and kind of distract us from the one that God really wants to put on our heart.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to that?
Yeah. You're good. I like the question that you're asking. So, yeah, I will tell you this. If you are going after something that you want and fear pops up, right? So notice that you're in a comfort zone, and the fear, if you look at, let's say, comfort zone like a circle, the fear is that line around that circle. And it's basically telling you, no, don't go there because it's going to hurt. It's going to do this or whatever it might be, right? Are you going to fail? Then how are you going to feel and all those things? So if it's fear, I will tell you that it's probably good indication that you're going the right direction.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's almost like to me is okay, I'm fearful. So, okay, I should, and in the caveat, I'm not talking about the fear that you were in the woods and there was a bear standing over there and you said, you know what, I should fight that bear. That's not the fear I'm talking about because you're not going to win that battle with the bear,
Right.
right? He's going
Right.
to take you out. But I'm talking about in business. That fear is an indication that's telling you moving in the right direction. So there's a freedom on the other side of it. And every single time, I don't know how many times, like for instance, you experienced some fear and you actually took the step in spite of that fear being there. And now you're on the other side and you learned something new. And then you look back and you're like, that wasn't so bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to
Right.
be.
Right.
Right. So now it gives you a more um, confidence to take the next step and the next step and the next step. Every single time you're going to do something new that you've never done before, guess what's going to pop up? That fear.
Yeah. I know you had mentioned at the show that or at the top of the show that you had really had an interest in psychology and stuff. And so maybe it would help our listeners too to kind of just remind them that when you look at anxiety or fear, the
Mhm.
best way to deal with that is not to run away and go do something else. It's
Mhm.
to actually face it, because that's the only way that we have the experience that tells us that that is a safe thing to do.
Yeah.
If we always are pushing away from it, we never get that experience to say, "Hey, this is manageable and doable." Like you said, it wasn't so bad, right? Uh,
Right.
I think that's a big thing to understand. And also, too, when we look at Joshua and God telling him, be strong and courageous, I know a lot of people use the word courage and courageous to mean fearless. And I really do not like that. So
Yeah,
I just want to talk about that a little, for a second, too, because the definition of courage doesn't mean to be fearless. You can do a lot of things when you have fear. But to be courageous means that you do what you need to do despite your fear or
right.
despite the negative feelings that you're having. So
Yeah,
when God is talking to Joshua and instructing him to have courage, he's not saying be totally fearless. He's understanding that Joshua can be kind of scared to go on and take Jericho, right? But he's saying, I'm going to be with you through this. No matter what you feel, like we are going to have victory. It's okay if you're a little scared, but I will be with you through it. And I think for us, this idea of fearlessness that we have in our culture, that can hold us back from being our true self too, because we get in this idea that we have to like do things that make us really uncomfortable. And discomfort is not a bad thing, but I think there's a certain level of discomfort that we can tolerate. And small increments of stepping into new things can get us to our authentic self.
yeah.
Versus if we just kind of jump in to huge things that we think are going to be the vision, right? That's what society tells us. If we jump into that, then it's like it's too much. Like we can't handle it. So then we turn away from it, right? And
Yeah, we
or we
go
don't handle
backwards.
it
Yeah,
well. Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love that you brought it up because think about it this way. Like, yeah, courage doesn't mean that there's absence of fear. Like, it's going to be there. I think some people, what they do is they wait for the fear to at some point go away.
Mhm.
One that, whatever I need to do, whether it's in a personal development space or I need to shift my thinking or whatever it might be, at some point that fear is going to be going away and then I can actually do it. If you understand that fear is going to be there and it's like an access, and like you said, God said to Joshua, listen, I'm going to be there with you.
Mhm.
Like in my mind, the way I look from that perspective is God is everywhere, like literally everywhere.
Right.
I mean, I don't think there is anything in our lives, physical human lives here, like the air that I'm breathing right now, he's in this air kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
If that is the case, that there is no escaping of me for him not to be there, right? And if he put me on this earth to do something impactful, to do something with other people, then guess what? Is he going to completely abandon me? No. If anything, I might just walk away, but he's always going to be there, right? So if
Mhm.
that's the case, I have a comfort that he's got me, right? So that's one. Another thing I want you to consider is this. Think about the times in your life when you went through a really difficult season. And I mentioned season because I think we go through seasons in life. Some
Mhm.
people have a longer season, some people have shorter seasons. Good, bad, and ugly, right? Now, the bad or the ugly seasons that you've had, like my divorce, for instance, the 2 years after my divorce between 2011 and 2013, if I look back at that particular time, as much as I didn't want to deal with that season, didn't want to do it back then, I grew the most because of that season.
Mhm.
So think about it this way. Because of those seasons, I had to deal with a lot of the different things about myself or whatever. It actually helped me become a better person. So that tells you that maybe that particular season, as sucky as it was for me, happened for me, not to me.
Right.
So if I take on the idea that everything happens for me, not to me, then I can look back in my life and I'm like, huh, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to do this. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be able to do this, right? I mean, look at like when the uh, Israelites coming out of Egypt, right? There were so many different things that happened. If it wasn't for that thing to happen, if the plagues didn't happen, they wouldn't be coming out of Egypt, right? If that
Right.
didn't happen, then if the sea didn't open up, therefore, it's like all kinds of different things. And then they ended up, in the promised land. Well, what, 4 years later, they could have done it a lot sooner. It's a different conversation, but it has helped everything happen for me in order to get to where I'm at.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that, that it happens for you rather than to you. I absolutely love that. Um, One thing that I was thinking too as I was listening to you is that aspect that you're talking about really does require you to have like a more long-term vision for
Hmm.
yourself. Because if you are just focused on, I mean, they always say be in the present, right? But
Yeah.
if you are only focused on the present, then you're not seeing the entire spectrum of what God did and what he can do in the future. So like you have to zoom out a little bit to say,
Yeah.
what could this be? Because I don't necessarily know. I know what it looks like here in the present, but maybe God knows better than I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does totally make sense. And the thing is, think about this one. We human beings are horrible at timing. We're horrible at how something takes long, right? How long
Yeah.
something takes. We think it's gonna, you changing this, let's say fixing the shelf in your house is gonna take 15 minutes, and 3 hours later, you're still working on that shelf, right?
Yeah.
Or you think it's gonna take you, 10 years to get to that life that you want. And I've seen many cases where students actually got there in like 2, 3 years, right? So we're horrible with that. So you have that plan, and I tell my students, imagine like a GPS. If you live in, let's say I live in Michigan, I want to go to San Diego. And if you actually use your GPS on your phone, right? So first thing that you need to put in is where you're at currently, right? That's the first thing the GPS knows. Where is my current location? And I'm here in this particular house in Michigan. Then I want to get to what? Let's say San Diego, on the docks in San Diego. So that's my vision that I want to get to. And then when the GPS, when it hits start, does it show you the entire road? It tells you it will take you maybe 2, 3 days to drive there. I don't know how long, but it only shows you what? About 500 feet in front of you.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, we trust the GPS that's going to direct us to end up in San Diego. We use this computer, we trust it. However, a lot of times as Christians, we don't trust that the Lord is going to be able to do that for
Yep.
us.
Yep.
And what ends up happening, maybe he puts in the right person to our lives. Like I wouldn't be able to do what I do without other people in my life.
Mhm.
So I give credit to God and to people that showed up and he sent to my life. So when you look from that perspective, all of a sudden you know the vision, and that allows you to be present in life to be able to walk along that vision.
Okay. So thinking about all the things that we've covered, when we are, what would you say to somebody who knows, they're trusting God with that little part that they can see in that GPS,
Hmm.
but they genuinely are logistically stuck. Like they just can't, every roadblock that you could possibly, like they are hustling, right? But
Hmm.
they just can't seem to get things to turn over, right? At what point do we maybe, if at all, say, okay, maybe this isn't the vision that God has for me? Maybe I was wrong. Is there ever a point where maybe that could be?
Yeah, I don't think there is a point like that, and you have to, I think at that particular moment, you have to sit down and ask yourself, is this my vision or is this God's vision?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And when you start looking from that perspective, because if you believe that truly in your heart, you believe this is God's vision, then I would say, like, I have this idea, I'll never give up, you know? And sometimes that has helped me tremendously. Like when I was going through my divorce, I had my brother-in-law came to me and said, "Listen, I'll get you a job in the company that I'm working with, and just do it." And for some reason, something within me said, "No, I need to keep moving what I'm doing right now." And if I wasn't, I guess, in a way, faithful to this journey, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now. I'll be working for someone else right now. So I think there is a discernment that needs to happen. That's why spending time with the Lord, the quiet time.
Mhm.
Listen to the nudge. I think we all have, like tell my students, listen to your nudge, like the Holy Spirit. It's a really good guidance system. It's probably one of the best guidance systems that we have. But we are so much noise in our life that we have a hard time hearing it. I think it's always talking to us, but we have so much noise that we have a hard time hearing it. So spending time in the morning, let's say starting with like 10 minutes even, and just be quiet and see what the voice is telling you. It will help you kind of guide you. And then maybe another door opens or you get clarity and you start, listen, you're going the wrong direction kind of a thing, right? Because you deep down inside, you feel like, okay, this doesn't feel good. Something is off, right? And then you're like, okay, you know what? I need to shut that door. I need to literally stop doing this. And what happens a lot is another door opens.
Mhm.
And now you see, oh, okay, so now I can move forward. Does that make sense? I
Yeah.
know it's not like a very pragmatic step 1, 2, 3, but I think, spiritually speaking, I think that's more like what I just described than anything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense in the sense that, we can't always see everything, but if we are, attuned to our authentic self, and I think then we get a better sense. Like it feels more solid, like you were saying. Like if
Hmm.
it feels wrong, that's a big clue on its own that you're maybe not being in the right direction. Um, but I want to differentiate between, maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable with something and really feeling like something's off. Like I think there's a difference there. Like, 'cause like if you just haven't done something, that's one thing, but if you
Yeah.
have this sense of like, something's like, I don't want to say like impending doom, but
Hmm.
like you just know that that is not the direction and it's just this feeling like this weight. At least that's how I've experienced it for myself. Um, but I also kind of want to bring up, I don't know if you are a fan of Star Wars at all.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's one of
uh,
my favorite movies. Yeah, I'm a Star Wars as opposed to Trekkie. Yeah, so Star Wars all the way.
okay. So Yoda's little mantra, where he says, do or do not, there is no try. Right. And
Yep.
that has kind of become my mantra of life. And it's not because I want to say, okay, well, I can never make a mistake or I can never quit. It's because I recognize how much further I can get if I don't let go right away. Like just to persist that little bit extra and keep trying different things, like not giving up. Like if I try, door number one and that doesn't work, okay, well, that doesn't mean there's not doors 2 through 200. I just got to
Yeah.
try a couple more, right?
Hmm.
And I think sometimes what happens is we just give up too quickly and we say, well, I've
Yeah.
been through 10 doors. That must be it, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I have that as my mantra. It's just like there are so many things that are figure outable if you persist a little bit longer than you want to.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. Yeah, because that's one of the reasons, like, never give up. That's mantra kind of thing. One of
Mhm.
my best friend, for instance, he told me one time he was going to real estate. He's never done real estate. And it took him 82 offers to get his first deal.
Ooh,
Now think about it this way. How many times, and he had a coach that will keep encouraging, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, because you're learning something new every single time.
right.
Now he could have stopped at five offers. He could have stopped at 10, but whatever it was, it kept him going, right? Because he knew deep down that this was the answer. So if that is the case, you got to keep moving forward because every single time you're doing something that's uncomfortable, but you know you're going that direction, you're going to learn something new. So, but what ends up happening is people will go into, and that's why we have the shiny object syndrome, I think, happens in people's lives because they go after this specific business and they get up against some kind of a door that it feels like fear, right? And oh, now I didn't know that in when I'm doing real estate, I have to go a whole bunch of people. I'm not a people person. I'm a, introvert, right? So that's not me. Well, then I need to go a business that I'm sitting behind a laptop, right? And I'm got some online business. So I'm starting the online business and I discovered I need to market on the internet. Well, I'm not a marketer, so that's not the business. I need to figure out a different business. And I think that's the wrong way of doing it because you're going to, in every single business venture, you're going to hit some kind of a ceiling. You're going to have to break through it. So I think that's what you're kind of talking about.
Yeah.
So when you go and break through that to the next level, then you're going to learn something new and the next one and the next one.
Mhm.
So, and that's ultimately you're going to succeed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of the difference between being willing to, kind of figure out what your skill set really is or can be too, rather than saying I have to fit within the skill set that I already think I have. Like those are two different
Yeah.
mindsets, right? And I
Yeah.
know for me, like even with the podcasting, I started, I wasn't doing any interviews at all. And then I'm like, I really need to like bring some people on because I don't know everything. I need to like have other people with their expertise. I'm like, well, I'm so introverted. I don't want to do that. And yet God was kind of telling me, just go out and meet people. Like you need a
Yeah.
network. And lo and behold, like I am not necessarily completely comfortable, but I can manage it, right? And so I'm learning that that is a skill that he gave me that I didn't even really know that I could use. And but
Yeah.
it's coming out. And so I think again, like if you just step into it, you might be surprised at how far you can get and you didn't even realize it.
Right. And I will tell you this from my experience with you so far, you're one of the best interviewers that I've come across,
Oh, well, thank you.
because of the way you talk and question. So, but yeah, I think that's a really good distinction that you were looking from that perspective because when God is leading you, right? I mean, look at Peter out of the Bible,
Mhm.
fisherman, right? So he knows how to fish. He goes and does his thing every single day. And then here comes Jesus and said, listen, come with me, follow me, you're going to be fishing men. And you're like, what? Hada, what? Are you kidding me? I'm not the guy,
Right.
right? And it ends up happening that you're going to have to grow. And I think it's you actually growing more back into your authentic self, what you were meant to be. And when you start to recognize that, all of a sudden, deep down inside feels like it's the right thing,
Mhm.
but the world is trying to stop you from doing that. And that's when you, every single day, you have to, if you feel like you're on the right path, okay, the next step, just the next step, just the next step. And you keep taking the next step. And then maybe you like shift it a little bit, right? Like if I call, like when I was releasing the book, I made so many connections, so many phone calls, so many things that I would not have done in the past. But I knew that this was not about me. This was about helping people. So notice there was a different why it was for me. And I
Mhm.
kept doing it, kept doing it, kept doing it. And I think that's what kind of you have here. Your why for what you're doing is not about you so much, it's about somebody else. And when it comes to be a somebody else, now all of a sudden, an introvert, like you mentioned, stop shining the light on yourself and you actually help others.
Yeah.
Make
Well, I'm
sense?
trying. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I know for me, having that experience, and kind of like we were talking about before, like if you have that experience and then it's not so scary, it gets easier to do. And so that's kind of what I'm learning with this experience too, is
Hmm.
that, I can lean into it more because now I have had the experiences that went well. And I think everybody who's trying to get to their authentic self kind of needs that. Like they need to just kind of say, I'm going to try it. It's not comfortable, but in my own experience, once I got into it, there were some really enjoyable points, in interviews, and there still are, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come. But I would never have had those enjoyable experiences if I would have listened to that fear. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Hmm.
just like focusing on that to say, like, I know you're scared, but there can be some really, really good, enjoyable things like joy that comes out of you facing your fear. And I don't
Yeah.
think we necessarily think about that. We just think about the fear.
No, yeah, exactly. I will tell you this. So I just came from an event. We have events going on in the country. We just had one event right now. And in front of the room, we started talking about fear. And I asked, does anybody here like snakes? And the lady raised her like, yeah, I actually have a snake. And then I said, does anybody in here hate snakes? And there was a whole bunch of hands that came up. So I started talking to these two people. And you hate snakes, you love snakes, right? Some people have fear of snakes. So I asked the person who loves snake, what about that snake? And she literally talked about how she loves it and how it's a really nice pet and it feels nice and like she described in a very kind of a loving way. Whereas the person who asked like, why do you hate that snake? Well, I hate it. I can't stand it. It bite me and then a whole bunch of different things. So notice what the big difference was. The one that's not afraid of the snakes had some kind of form of loving towards it. The meaning that she associated about that snake was more loving, more appreciative, more something good about it, was the other person was the opposite.
Mm.
So if we just start loving on our fears, what if you just found something that you love about that fear that's coming up? Well, I love the fact that it's actually coming up for me right now. That's a really good thing. Well, would you look at that? Maybe there is something I don't want to call that particular person, but maybe I'm going to learn something good, something new about the particular person.
Hmm.
Maybe something about the story. Maybe I should reach out to them. You reach out to them, and all of a sudden you get off the phone call. I'm like, well, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
You know? So that's how I think it's about loving on that fear that dismantles the power that the fear might have over you.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that to like love on your fear, but I love it. I'm gonna I'm gonna steal it. It's great.
Good. All right.
So, as we're kind of wrapping up here, you had brought up your book too, and I definitely want to get back to that for just a minute here. But is there anything that, from the core of the book that you really want to leave the listeners with based on everything that we've kind of chatted about?
Yeah. So one core element in the book, I mean, I talk about there's two parts of the book. One is the awakening and the other one's rebirth. And I think most of the times don't go through the awakening process because it sometimes feels um, crappy, for the lack of a better word. But we have to be able to reawaken to what our belief system is. And one of the things that in that belief, the awakening, what we discover is in order for us to be able to love someone else, right? To be able to go in life and love on these people, I think we have to love ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that actual love look like? And if you have an ego, or if you have some kind of like beating yourself up, you're depressed or whatever, guess what? You are not loving yourself unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big part. What is because we have a whole bunch of conditions that we set on ourselves, on our how we need to be, and whatever. Now, if we just love ourselves unconditionally, guess what? We are the way we are, and then we start moving, and we start taking action, and you start showing up in life in a completely different way, and especially with the people that are closest to you. So that's I think, big part of what we need to bring more into this world.
Yeah. Just to kind of connect that, maybe flip it just a little bit. I
Mm-hmm.
know from my own experience and, people that I know, they would hear that and say, well, I'm just in a place in my life where I can't love myself. Like there's just been too much bad things that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I want to tell listeners, if it helps anybody out there, is that just be open to other people, because that experience, again, experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the experience of allowing other people to love on you kind of teaches us that you're not so bad. And then I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where you can start to love yourself. Like if you need that little catalyst, and being open to say, like, they didn't reject me. I thought they would, but they didn't. Just little tiny experiences. It doesn't even have to be anything big. It can be like you went up and you bought a coffee and the barista was nice to you and you thought they were going to be mean, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey,
Mm-hmm.
that challenged my perception of what was going to happen. Well, take it. And just like
Yeah.
learn to accept that. I think a lot of us, we are in a mental state where it's just hard to do that. But if we open ourselves up a little bit, we accept that love, then we can say, okay, I love myself enough because they're seeing something in me that I
Yeah.
don't. And to question, well, what is that? And just start saying, because that is the authentic self. Like they are seeing it even though you don't. And they can help you connect to it, I guess is what I'm saying. And so there's a back and
Yeah.
forth to that, where
Yeah.
we give to other people, they give to us so that we know who we are.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great. Yeah. The blog. Glad you brought it up. Something. Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up here, do you mind if I pray for you?
Yeah. Oh, would love that. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
God, He is on a very important mission to help people connect to who you really designed them to be. I think the world gets in the way of that so easily. So, Lord, I ask that you bless his book and all the work that he's doing with that, bless his coaching, so that he can bring people to you by showing them the design that you really had for them. In Jesus' name, I pray.
Amen.
Okay.
Wow.
Well,
I
yeah,
love it.
just to let us go here, is there, if people want to learn more about you, where can they go?
They can go to a website, myauthenticrebirth.com. That's where the book is. And this is what it looks like. Actually, this is, I think, the first book ever that you can actually write your name on the front cover.
Oh, perfect.
So it would be Wanda's Authentic Self Rebirth, Peter's Authentic Self Rebirth, and you can buy that book anywhere the books are sold, whether it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And on Instagram, I have a channel called Authentic Self Rebirth, where I share a lot of those little tidbits, kind of like 90-second reels, kind of really powerful little nuggets that I think people would really appreciate it. So thank you for allowing me to step into your podcast here and, and love on your audience here. And hopefully they'll get something out of this for themselves.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'll make sure people have all the links in the show notes that they need. Thanks again for your time, Peter.
Thank you.
Listeners, as someone who put work at the center of life for years, I found Peter's view incredibly refreshing. I think it's one we need to really take a closer look at really seriously because of the transformation it can bring to what we're doing. Next episode, we're going to kind of keep this idea of the self and authenticity going with a chat with Greg Woodard. He's going to help us really understand the idea of soul care and what that means in our Christian living. While you wait for that, go check out the library at faithfulontheclock.com or visit Amazon to order your copy of Grace in the Grind, 52 Devotions for Thriving in the Workplace. Take care, everybody, and be blessed.
Like what you heard and want even more great Christian business content? Head on over to patreon.com/faithfulonthe-clock to become a supporting member for the show. You'll get access to options like early episode access, bonus episodes, videos, Bible studies, curated articles, and more in a tier plan that's right for you. Show your support for this podcast, and remember, enormous change can start with you.